everybody wants to get united. Like, what we gotta do is meet everybody on 149th Street at the bench.
There's one word in graffiti that just about pisses everybody off when it's said, and that is the word toy. Now, this is a real versatile word. It can be used in many different ways to mean many different things. So in today's video, I kind of want to chat about the different ways this phrase can be used, because there's more than one way for somebody to be a toy. And really, not all of them are meant as an insult, although a lot of times it is. So right off the bat, first we're going to start off with being called a toy because you're just flat out an amateur or you're new to the art form. Both of those are kind of grouping together as one thing because everybody who's new to the art form lacks skill in the art form. But sometimes you get people who are a decade in and they still lack skill and they certainly aren't new anymore. This one can be seen as a massive insult, especially when it's used against somebody who's not new to the art form. In a lot of cases, it's clearly meant as an insult, right? You know, you'll have a brand new graffiti artist who sees a graffiti legend and it'll say that person's toy, and it's like, well, they're not though. And then you'll have also a brand new graffiti artist who sees some of the most amazing work and they'll just kind of use the word toy in place of I don't like that. And when it's used in that way, it just makes the person saying it look more toy. But a lot of times when used to refer to the same exact thing, you'll have a more experienced graffiti artist looking at an amateur's work and saying, yeah, look, your work is a bit toy. And in this instance, it's not at all an insult. Sure, the one being called toy might feel insulted, but the phrase wasn't used in an insulting way. Rather, they're just using it as a declaration of the truth. They're simply just looking at your work and calling it for what it is. In this case, the word is being used more so as a replacement for amateur, with no malintent, nothing of that sort. Or you'll just have two graffiti artists that are really pissed with one another. They don't like one another at all whatsoever, and they'll use the phrase toy in that same way, where it's like, hey, you're an amateur, even though clearly neither of the two people arguing are an amateur. Now, as an amateur, hearing this, really, it's in your best interest to more so just kind of take that to the chin and accept the fact that, yeah, you are a toy. And maybe this person who's calling you a toy sees something that you can improve on. So it's best if you accept that reality and kind of look at your own work with a more critical eye and see where you can improve. I remember when I was first getting into graffiti, there was countless people that called me toy. And understand, back then, social media wasn't a thing. And I was still getting bombarded with this comment, right? I was still being called toy by a lot of people because there was a lot of graffiti artists around us, which tells you that, yeah, I was pretty bad. And at the time, I also had a massive ego about how good I was. I didn't think I was toy. But hearing it from all these people kind of let that reality set in that, like, all right, I do suck and I need to see where my issues lie. That way I can improve. And at the end of the day, that's a good thing. Sure, once again, it may not feel nice on the ego when you first get called that, but it leads to progress if you're able to take constructive criticism. Now, dudes, if at any point in this video you want to stop stressing about getting better in graffiti and learning the fundamentals, then head down to the description and check out our book. It is the fastest, most convenient, and easiest way to learn graffiti, because it's the only book on the market that teaches you all of graffiti's fundamentals, with hundreds of pictures throughout the book to help you along each lesson. We have digital ebooks over on our online store, theartistblock.inc, with physical copies over on Amazon. Once again, in the description down below. From there, we have when the word toy is used to refer to somebody that doesn't know the history of graffiti. And this one isn't really too much of an insult. It can be, sure, I mean, all of these can be, no doubt about that. Now, one aspect of the phrase toy that I never really liked all that much was the fact that it refers to somebody who doesn't know their history. This is something that was very relevant in the early days of graffiti because, well, the graffiti community was a lot smaller, there was a lot less people, there was a lot less legends to know about, a lot less history to know about. Nowadays, graffiti is global. There's graffiti artists all over the world that none of us will ever hear of. And now that graffiti is global, you could forget about people across the world knowing the history of graffiti. Not even the history could figure out the history. I remember that there was a museum not too far from where I live that had a graffiti history exhibit for their museum. They legit credited one of my friends in graffiti as being an old school New York graffiti artist, which is so far off the mark. It's ridiculous. And he can't come out and say anything because, I mean, the photos that they have are all of illegal graffiti. So what's he gonna do and go, hey, I confess to this crime? You know, it's like, here's my identity, here's who I am, please credit me? I don't think so. So not only can graffiti artists not get the history right, but neither can reputable or seemingly reputable establishments get it right. And for that reason, you really can't fault people for not knowing graffiti's history when graffiti's history wasn't wasn't well documented in the slightest. As a result of this, a lot of people say that you should just know the history of your area, and I think that's a fair compromise. I think that that's reasonable. If you're getting into graffiti and it's a pretty active area, well then yeah, you should know who's up and who's been up and who's done what, so on and so forth. But if there's no graffiti in your area and you start doing graffiti in your area, well then you are the history of that area. You are the start for that area. Now that doesn't mean that we shouldn't learn any of the history. Every single graffiti artist, no matter where you are in the world, should make an effort to at least learn the general graffiti history. It doesn't have to be exact because once again graffiti wasn't well documented, but you should make an effort to learn the general graffiti history. Watch interviews, look at some magazines, and some of it will be misinformation, some of it will be bloated lies to embellish stories from graffiti artists back then, and some of it will be true, which is why we're not really putting too much of a focus on accuracy in these instances. But if you get called toy for that reason, you shouldn't really get too up in arms about it. Now lastly, we have toy being used to refer to somebody that doesn't respect the graffiti community, and by extension doesn't respect graffiti's ethics and rules. And we oftentimes see very experienced graffiti artists get called toy for this reason. For example, and this is not meant, to necessarily take shots at anybody, it's just the reality of the situation, but Cope 2 is a great example of this, where he's a graffiti legend. He's probably the best example of this because he's a graffiti legend, and yet a lot of people call him toy specifically for what he's done within the graffiti community. Others call him toy for stuff he's done behind the scenes as well. So anybody of any skill level and any reputation can be toy for this reason. But the tricky part about this usage of the phrase is the fact that people have different standards for what they consider to be disrespect towards the graffiti community. Many hardcore writers that would never touch a legal wall a day in their life will call anyone who even so much as places their hand on a legal wall a toy. While other graffiti artists in the community believe that someone who goes over other writers' work consistently should be referred to as a toy because they lack respect for their fellow writer. Now, part of the section of having respect for the graffiti community does kind of involve following the ethics and rules of graffiti. There's a set of unwritten rules that a lot of graffiti artists live by, and while not all writers live by this, most of the community does. So disrespecting and not following these unwritten rules is a sign of disrespect to the graffiti community. Things such as going over other people's work, but also things such as hitting personal property like fences, cars, so on and so forth. A big one being hitting religious locations as well, and hitting rest in peace murals, rest in peace anything pretty much. All of that is seen as a huge sign of disrespect. Now in those instances, I definitely agree 1000% that that makes somebody a toy. And I get a lot of writers have this mentality of hit everything, doesn't matter, I don't need anybody's permission for anything. I mean, it's graffiti we're talking about. The whole premise of it is that you do things where you want, when you want, how you want. And if you prioritize that mentality over the ethics of graffiti, then you'll find yourself hitting people's personal property, religious places, and going over other people's work, so on and so forth. But if you put the community first before your own desires, then you prioritize the ethics and you prioritize not going over other people's work when you can help it, or if you don't have beef with them, not hitting places of worship, not hitting people's personal belongings, not hitting rest in peace murals. Now, only because some of you guys watching are brand new to graffiti. Personally, I like to give brand new graffiti artists some leeway here as far as respect to the community and culture because they simply just don't know. Especially in the two extremes where you live in an area that has no graffiti or you live in an area that has tons of graffiti. Because in the areas with no graffiti, well, you don't have anybody to learn from. And you also may not have a lot of surfaces if you live in the country, right? So you might find a fence and you might tag that fence without realizing that it goes against the ethics. And on the other extreme, if you live in an area that's densely populated with graffiti artists, well, you see graffiti literally everywhere on everything. You'll see graffiti on just about every building. So in your mind, everything's up for grabs. Why wouldn't you hit certain surfaces? You also see a lot of people going over one another. So you might also be inclined to just plop a tag on a wall you see, and whoever's underneath you, well, too bad for them. You don't think anything of it. So once again, I like to give some leeway, but if you live in an area with other graffiti artists, they may not know if you're new, and they're not going to cut you that same slack, nor really should they. And this is why it's always advised that you be careful when you do graffiti, because we make bad decisions, and other people in graffiti very well might hold us accountable for those decisions. Let me know what you guys think about the phrase toy. Overall, is it a phrase that's really overused? Sure. The phrase is definitely overused and lost a lot of its meaning nowadays because of how overused it is. But if you hear it, those are the different ways that you might hear it used. Let me know what you guys think about it in the comments down below. And if you're looking to improve your graffiti, find your style, and get rid of a lot of that frustration and confusion when learning graffiti, check out our book in the description down below. If you're wondering, are you still toy? Then then check out this video down here. And if you want the best how to do graffiti tutorials anywhere, check this playlist out right up here. As always, I want to thank you guys for watching. I'll catch you guys back here next week.